Okay, so let's get started. On any techno or tech house track, the bottom end is all important. So usually, unless I've got some sort of melodic idea or a riff or something in mind already, I'll start with the bottom end. So that's the kick and the bass. For kick drums, it's often very useful to be able to sample them from other records because you'll get nice punchy kicks that have been well mixed. And if you can process them yourself, it's a good resource. So learning to clean the any unwanted sounds and other percussion from kick drums from records is a very useful skill. So first off, let's drop into Arrange View here in Ableton by pressing Tab and drop this sampled kick here, which is a nice warm sounding kick, but as you can hear, it has got a little bit of a hi-hat or something on it, which we need to get rid of. So drop this into Arrange View and make sure warp is turned off, which it is in this case. Then zoom in and set a loop around the sample. It's actually a good trick to not have the loop start dead on the start of the sample for a reason which I'll explain later, but it's a little glitch in Ableton. So then we drop an auto filter onto the channel. And as we sweep the frequency, you can hear that it is removing all the high-end information from the sample, which does remove the hi-hat part, which we want to get rid of, but also in the same process removes a lot of the punch, which obviously we want to keep. So what we need to do is set up some automation on that filter. So if we just single-click on the filter frequency box here and add a couple of points of automation, something like that is probably about right. Yeah, so if I disable the filter again, you'll be able to hear the little hi-hat parts that we've just got rid of. There's like a little hi-hat or a shaker playing just after the kick, which now we've got that filter disabled should have disappeared. So that's now nice and clean, but still retaining the punch that we wanted. I'll just show you that looping problem that I was talking about before now. If you set the loop point dead on the start of the sample there, you can hear that Ableton's automation is kind of a little bit slow and doesn't quite catch up in time, which results in the kick being a bit muffled. So that's a handy little workaround. Then we right-click on the channel here and freeze. And do the same and flatten. So that means we've now resampled that kick drum sound with all the filtering and fades and everything all embedded within it. So we've got a nice tight punchy kick there. But I think potentially it might be nicer if we had a little bit of a sharper attack on it, a little bit more bite at the start of the kick drum. So let's look for a layer. We'll have a little browse into our Spektre Loop Masters pack here, into the drum hits and the kick drums. So let's have a listen. Let's audition a few of these. Yeah, number 3 there sounds like it's got a nice punch, the kind of attack on the start of it that we're looking for. So you can hear that new sample's got the attack we want, but yeah, the two together aren't quite complementing each other as much as they should at the moment. There is a little bit of clipping going on there, but I feel the two aren't quite going together as well as they should, so let's just have a little play with that for a moment. So let's just reduce the volume of those two channels first so that we're not clipping. And yeah, to try and get these two sitting together a little bit better, generally a good technique is to play with the tuning on one of the kicks, because this can help sort out any sort of phase relationship problems that you have. So let's just play with the transpose a minute. Yeah, you can hear it kind of locks into place a little bit on -2 semitones there. So they're kind of fitting together now, but the bottom end still sounded nicer with just the original kick. Yeah, that bottom end's quite nice and I think it's going to be quite suitable for the track. So let's just go on to the new kick that we added. And there's an EQ8 already on the channel, as you can see. And I'm just going to enable band number 1, which is set to the new 4-pole high-pass filter, which is new in Live 9. So let's solo our kick, which we're getting the high end punch from, and have a little sweep around with the frequencies and try it with the other kick and just sort of find a point that works. So we've improved the punch there, but kept the bottom end as we wanted it. Don't need as much of the tail, so let's show fades and just do a little fade out there to tidy that up a bit. So that's more like what we're after. If we just A-B it here, you can hear it's just adding a nice little bit of punch to the other kick. Although, if anything now, the attacks of the two kicks are clashing slightly. So maybe we should try and remove a little bit of the attack portion of the deep kick that we started with. As before, it's just a case of showing fades and then putting a very, very short fade in onto the lower kick sample. And you can now just hear that that's cleaned things up a bit and made a bit of space so that you can hear the pop from this one and the low end depth from this one, but without any sort of clash between the two. Just fine tune that frequency very slightly. So now that we've got both of those layers sounding just about right, it's probably a good idea to freeze and flatten both tracks again, as we did before. And do the same for the other kick so that those EQ settings that we had in there are committed into the audio. And probably a good idea to just check everything still sounds okay, which it does. So now, rather than having those samples floating around as audio parts on the arrange view, it'll make life a lot easier as we're putting the track together if we can collect them together onto samplers on a MIDI track. So if we create a new MIDI track here, and drop our kick on here, and then if we just hit a key on the keyboard, that should be playing. But we want both kicks to be playing on the same MIDI channel. So if we right click on the header here and select group, and press this little button to open up the chain list, then we can drag the other kick onto a new chain. So now you can hear that when I hit a key, both of those two samples are playing layered over one another, which, as well as making life easier than having multiple channels, also gives us a bit of control, because if, for instance, I want to give the kick a little bit more punch, I can just turn this one up. And conversely, if I want to give it a little bit more depth, I can turn this one up. So that gives us a nice controllable kick drum tone to use in the track without having to rely too heavily on EQ, which is never a bad thing. So we can now delete those two audio tracks because the kick is all contained in the MIDI track. So let's rename that kick and switch back into session view by hitting the tab key. Turn the loop off and double click on one of these empty spaces to create a new MIDI clip. And then we'll just program a very simple 4/4 kick pattern. So double click again here to create a note, select it and Command D to duplicate. BPM seems a little bit low there, so let's change that to 125. And that's all the sound design work done on our kick drum. Okay, so now we've got our kick drum down and the two layers working together here. It's time to work on the bass. So for this track, I'm going to use a bass line that is made of two layers. Firstly, a sine wave based sub-layer, and then some more percussive textured stuff on top. So for the first part, we're going to use Ableton's operator synth. And I'll just drop an instance of that on a new channel now. And you can hear that the basic sort of initialization patch on this is basically just a nice pure sine wave, which is not very far at all from what we need for this. So first of all, just drop the coarse tuning down to half just so it goes a little bit lower. And then we can start working on a little pattern, which is going to be very, very simple. So double click there to create a new MIDI part. And then we just want to draw in a simple pattern with a couple of notes. So something like this, just a simple 2-beat pattern. So if we drag that and do Command and L to set up a loop. That's a very, very basic start point. But you can hear that the general idea is there, that it's just a kind of plodding on-beat bass line. So we need to add a little bit more movement to that first. So I've turned the volume up a little bit on operator firstly. And the second thing we're going to do to add some more interest to it is some pitch bend. So if you make sure that this tab in operator, the bottom right one here, is selected, and this parameter here is the pitch bend amount. So if we whack that up to 12 semitones, so we've gone an octave of pitch bend, so that just gives us a decent amount to play with. Then we can go into the part and program a bit of a bend into the part. So if we go on to envelopes here, which you open up like so, and go into MIDI control and pitch bend, which is already set as the default. And we'll just draw a little bend in on this second note. So we switch to the draw tool just so you can get a nice sharp point on the on there, and we'll go up to, let's try there, and have that bending back down again. So as you can hear, that gives it a little bit more, a bit of movement, and is an interesting sub-layer, because bear in mind that this isn't going to be the bass line in its entirety. This is kind of a base layer, a bottom layer that sits underneath some more percussive parts. So that works from a notes point of view. So let's add a little bit of modulation now to make it pulse with the kick a little bit. This is a good trick to use in lots of different circumstances, actually. Rather than using side chaining, which can sometimes, particularly with things like sine waves, where you've got a lot of bottom end information and not much top, any little clicks that the compressor makes become really, really obvious on this kind of material. So using Live's clip modulation is actually a more precise way to do it. So if we go into envelopes here and go to mixer and track volume, and then if we right click over here and click show modulation, and this gives us a relative volume level of the channel volume. So we can draw in sort of little automated fades that do a similar job to a sidechain. So if we draw in a point here and take it down to, let's say, 60-something% there, and have it curving up like so. And the key thing that you wouldn't be able to do very accurately with a sidechain compressor is that you can actually fade it down again just before the next beat, which lets you get rid of those clicks. So if we select a beat's worth there and duplicate that, Command and D, and solo it, you can hear that that does a similar job to a sidechain, but we've got really detailed control over it. So, you know, we can make it go a little bit more like that, or, you know, you've got real total control over the curve. Yeah, so that'll work nicely. So if we pop the kick back in, that's sounding pretty good. We could maybe go a little bit deeper actually with the volume cut there. So if we just pop back in here and drag that down a little bit, and do the same on that one, and take those little erroneous points of automation out, and make sure it ends up about the same point down here. You can hear we've got a nice sidechain type pumping effect, but with a little bit more control than you would have done if you're using an actual sidechain compressor. So that's the sub layer pretty much done, and on the next step we'll move on to adding some more interesting percussive elements to the bass.